Hello everyone, this is Paul. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel and for watching this new video. Today I wanted to just show you a simple still life tutorial that you could follow along, and I hope that you will. As you can see on the iPad here, I've got a still life painting from the Italian artist Giorgio Morandi, who lived in the early part of the 20th century. I believe he died in the around 1950s, early 60s. And the majority of his paintings were still lives like this that were very simple, very calming, and but yet so enchanting, just wonderful to look at. I really enjoy his work, and of course I'm on the Pinterest app here, but if you just keep scrolling, you can see how, let me adjust my camera here, you can see how all of his still lives were very simple, very basic, but yet just very, very calming to look at, very charming to view, and I just simply love his work. And so I wanted to do a short tutorial to help you uh, be able to do something like this on your own. I will be working in acrylics, and just to show you real quick what I've done, I've made just a few swatches to compare to the painting here. I try to get as close as I could. As you can see, the upper part of this jar will be this color, and this is a mixture of burnt sienna with white and a little bit of cad yellow, and then of course we get a little bit more yellow here, and this is the swatch here. This is the shadow color, which is a mixture of ultramarine blue and red. Then we've got our white, sorry, just like this box here. We've got our white here, and then we've got this very cool green for the little ball that's at the bottom. So let me adjust my camera and then we'll get started. So I just wanted to give you one more picture of the painting that we'll be copying from. This is, of course, this is not a copy, it's just a study. A copy would be something that would be exactly like this. We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to follow some details and get some ideas of how Morandi executed his paintings. And so this is the one that we'll be doing. And interestingly enough, all of his still life paintings were called still life. He didn't title the still lives. They were all the same title, still life in Italian. So thought that was very interesting about him. So let's go ahead and get started. Now the acrylic paints that I'm using are from Charvin, and they're extra fine acrylic. These are so beautiful such beautiful pigments, paints. They are a little costly, but I find that it's very worth it. I love these paints. I had to wait a couple of years before I could start affording these, but I've grown, I've accumulated quite a collection of these, and I just really enjoy them. And so, of course, you don't have to use these. Any brand paint that you have will do just fine. This is just my preference. And for my acrylics, I'm using what is called the Stay Wet palette. And all this is, it's a very simple, it's a very simple product. You wet the yellow sponge there, and then you put this blotting paper over, and it keeps the paints moist. And once you're done painting, you can seal it, and it keeps the paints moist for weeks, months. I've had these paints in here for a little bit over 2 months, and they're still very moist. And so if you have one of these would be great to use. So let's go ahead and get going. So what I have here is a a watercolor pencil. I'm going to use for our the initial sketch of the painting, the Morandi painting. And of course, like I said earlier, this is not a copy. This is just a study. So, let's see, comes about that. Morandi's paintings they're so simple, and yet no one was doing something like this at the time. And that's what sets him apart from other artists. And he was a very quiet man. He kind of reminds me of myself. He a very private man, very quiet. He would paint through a telescope from his studio room. He didn't seem to go out too often, although he was a professor of art there at one of the universities in Italy. But overall, he was just a very quiet, personal man, and that's kind of how I am. Sometimes my wife has to push me to get out, and I like staying home. I like staying home and painting, listening to music, reading books. It's not always like that because we do have 4 boys, and sometimes it gets a little crazy. But so just getting the basic drawing down. And again, this is watercolor pencil, so this will start to blend in with the acrylics. And I'm gonna kind of use the acrylics as watercolor. Okay, so we have our initial sketch down. So this top color here for the top of the jar, I've mixed with burnt sienna, titanium white, and this is a special color from Charvin. It's called Saint Remy Yellow, which is this, and this kind of just tones it down a little bit. I understand that not everyone may not have that specific color, but you can always lighten down the yellow with some white and add it in there, or maybe like a Naples yellow, you might get the same shade there. So that's what I've used for the top, that we're going to use for the top of this jar. And I'm using my flat brush. The paper that I'm using is watercolor paper. It's 140 pounds, cold press. And what's really, really beautiful about Morandi's paintings is that he does not hide his brush strokes. And that's one thing that I absolutely love about his paintings, is that you can see the swiftness of his hand, how he's just moving that paint around on the canvas, and he's not trying to smooth anything out. And I think that's just a really lovely feature to see in paintings. I'm going to add a little bit, let's see, just a little bit of burnt sienna on the side, just to kind of put some little bit of texture, I guess you can say, in there. And the good thing about acrylics is that you can treat it like watercolors. You can always wet them down. It looks like there's a little bit, maybe a little bit of black, dark brown up there. Again, this is not a copy, it's just a study. And we'll put in that shadow later. Rinse the brush out and dry it off. Now, this color here that will be for the bottom half of the jar is a mixture of burnt sienna, titanium white, and French primary yellow. There it is, right there, French primary yellow, and that's how we get this sort of a mustardy color. And that's going to be for the bottom of the jar. And I'm going to add just a little bit more of that yellow. I think that should do it. Now, before I add that color, I'm going to put in a little bit of water in my brush. A little bit more water, just to spread it around. All right, great. I think I'm going to add a little bit more, just a little white to it. White, and then a little burnt sienna. By itself over here. Okay, good. Before we go on, I want to show you the bucket that I use. Now, it's a good practice to have 2 containers of water. One for when the paint is on the brush and you're washing it, and then a second container of water to just give it a good rinse. That way, you know that you have a clean brush to go to your next paint. So if you have a bucket like this, that'd be great, or even 2 cups, 2 jars. But it's always a good idea to do that. That's just a little tip that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so now on to the to this box shape here, this oblong shape, I guess you could call it. And that's just basically a mixture of titanium white and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Get a little bit more water to move that around. A little bit more white. Then we get a little bit just pure white and no blue. Okay. And rinse out. And as you can tell, up until now, I've only used one brush, which is my flat brush. And it's been doing all the work so far. And so that's really good. I like that. For this shadow color, which I want to turn over just real quick. So the shadow color, of course, on camera, it looks almost like a very dark blue or even black, but it's not. It almost has a purplish tint to it. So for that shadow color, of course, blue and red make purple. So that's what I'm gonna do. Just mix a little bit of ultramarine and some red, which is, for me, what I, it's, let me see, again, I'm using the Charvin, that is Oriental Red that I'm using. And I'm gonna wet my brush just a little bit so that shadow color moves around good. Let's start on the jar. And put some movement in your brush. Don't just keep it stiff, because that all shows up in the painting. Also on the bottom of the jar. Good. Now in the picture on top of this, it seems like there's a little bit more. It seems like a little bit of a burnt sienna on this side. And then it kind of mixes into our purple shade color. So I'm gonna get a little bit more water. I'm gonna mix a little bit more of that purple color. One moment. There we go. Now, if you wanted to make this a little bit more dark, you can always add more blue. And if you don't have a red, you can use a blue and a brown. Go across there on the bottom. Okay. Rinse out the brush. Now for this shadow color of this object here, I just added more burnt sienna, or I added burnt sienna to the purple mix that I have here. So that's what I'm going to use for the shadow. Just a purple mixture with some burnt sienna added to it. And I'm going to add a little bit more water. And of course, I'm looking back at the picture while I'm doing this, which is a very good practice, especially when you're doing a study. I'm gonna just draw out my brush on I have a flower sackcloth here on my lap. And I'm just gonna draw my brush out and just kind of lift out some of that wet paint. I'm gonna get some of this blue that I have and just kind of scrape that in there. Okay. And of course, again, all this is being done with my flat brush. So you don't have to have a handful of brushes. You can do a whole painting with just one. Of course, the beautiful thing about art is that it's whatever you prefer. The way to work. The way you want to work is how you want to work. Of course, there's methods, there's good practices to learn, but ultimately, you do what is most comfortable for you. Okay, good. Okay, so lastly, we have this little round object here. It almost looks like a baby's rattle. We have like a very, I guess like a very light limeish green with a very sandy brown here, light sandy brown. And so let's do that as our last object to paint for this still life painting. Okay, so now for that very light green, I have this chromium oxide green from Charvin and the Saint Remy yellow. And I'm gonna mix those two to get that very lovely green on that round shape. So let's take some. It's actually gonna be more yellow than green. Okay. Again, a little bit of water. I think we can come up just a little bit because looking back at the picture, it is half and half, these two colors. All right. Now going back to the palette, this is the mustardy color that we used for the bottom of the jar. So I'm gonna use that color again for the top half of the of that ball, but I'm going to add a touch of titanium white to it to lighten it up. Probably a little bit more. And I'm going to also have a little bit more water in it. That way the color is a little faint when we apply it. So let me add some water. All right, let's see how we do. Again, just looking back and forth to my reference. And this is such a simple painting, even a sketch to do. Anybody can do it, even if you've never had any kind of experience with art. You know, I've heard people say, I can't even draw a straight line. Well, you can. You just get a ruler and you draw a straight line. That's how simple it is, you know. There's a tool. There's always tools to help you. And art does not have to be perfect. As a matter of fact, I think the less perfect looking that it looks, the more charming it is, the more appealing and more attractive it is. So you can do this. Okay, so lastly for this shadow color here, it's a dark brown. We could probably use like a, maybe like a burnt umber or a Van Dyke brown, which is one of my favorite browns. But for now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna mix some burnt sienna, because it's already on my palette, and some ultramarine blue just to kind of darken it. And we're gonna create those indentions and the shadow color. Now for this this last bit of detail, I am going to switch to my round brush, which is a number 6. And I'm going to have plenty of water on it with that mixture of burnt sienna and blue to make our shadow color. It's a little too heavy, so I just add some water. There we go. That's what I wanted right there. Again, don't keep straight lines. I'm looking at the reference. So it's a little bit darker here. Kind of goes there. There's another one here. I'm gonna get some more paint, less water. That way it's a little bit more heavy on the shadow. I think we're about done. See how simple this was? I mean, it's so enjoyable to do a still life. It's so relaxing. I know, like for me, times can get a little heavy, a little hectic, and sometimes you just need an outlet to kind of relieve that stress, some of that stress, and forget your troubles for a while. And that's what I do. Besides prayer and reading scripture, I always get my sketchbook out, or even something like this, just a watercolor notebook here, and I just start painting. And it's just so enjoyable. It really is a gift to be able to paint. And you don't have to be a classically trained artist to do this. Anybody can do this. Anybody can. And I'm just putting some finishing touches on this. And again, I just want to thank you for watching. I hope that you give this a try. I hope that you will discover the joy and just the pleasure of painting that it brings. Even if you don't have paints, then sketch this out. Sketch this out. Even a simple sketch is so freeing, if I can say it that way. And wherever you are, I want to wish you a good day or a good night. And I hope that you have a great day ahead of you. And if you're going through anything, I want you to know there's hope, that there is always hope. As long as you're breathing, there's always hope, and things will get better. And so I thank you for joining me as I went along with this, as I went step by step with this tutorial. And I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you also try it out. So thank you so much. God bless. Bye-bye.